Over the years, identifying crypto narratives early has helped me turn a couple of $1,000s into hundreds of thousands of dollars. The biggest problem most people face is that they discover narratives too late, and by the time they find them, the narrative gains have already been realized. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I keep track of emerging narratives, show you how I connect the dots, and the system that I have built to help me keep track of these narratives, because otherwise you'll have to stay online chronically 24/7, but AI has helped me make this a lot easier to keep track of. So this is part one of a 5-part mini-series, and by the end of it, you'll understand why narrative earns its slot in the 5-part framework that I'll be explaining over the next 5 videos. So as I said, narratives is part one of the 5 signals, and tracking narratives helps us identify potential early. So a couple of questions I ask myself before I look at a coin or try to understand the concept of the coin is, what story does this coin belong to? Is it part of a trend that's already moving or a new meta? So over here, we have VVV. Now, VVV came out a year ago, but it just didn't gain that much attention. It kind of just fizzled out after the airdrop hit and everybody forgot about it. However, as time passed, we began to see at the beginning of 2026, it began to gain more attention. Now, there's a couple of reasons why. So first of all, there was another narrative attached to VVV, and that was privacy. Privacy became a really strong narrative at the end of 2025. We can see Zcash running 1,200% towards the upside, which gained that privacy narrative seal of approval. We knew privacy was important because a lot of other coins began to attach to this privacy narrative as they began spawning to chase the money made from Zcash. Now, another thing to remember here is back in early 2026, Maltbook blew up in popularity in 2026. And not only that, we also had agents in general coming out. And what happened was these agents needed privacy. So VVV running up was timing based, and it was kind of the perfect storm with these different narratives attaching to each other and giving VVV that boost, as well as having a credible founder who was delivering on the project. That was another narrative attached to it, where we had a vocal founder who was creating a product that was in demand and a problem that needed to be solved. And as I said before, this had knock-on effects. And one of them is NOK. You can see right here, we had NOK move towards the upside about 7x from the bottom to the top. Why? Because VVV moving up had reinstilled belief that AI coins had liquidity to attract. So multiple coins began going up after this move towards the upside. NOK was one of them. And then we had Serve. And that was just another one. We had tons of other AI coins gaining liquidity because of what happened with VVV. We could see the potential that AI coins had within the crypto sphere, and they were severely undervalued compared to what was going on in the stock market. So this is just one example of how narrative can play into what happened with VVV. It was the perfect storm between privacy, and then you had the AI agents, and because of that, it attracted liquidity to other legit AI coins. So here's another example. A new meta means higher potential upside, but requires more patience. The next example here is Cards. And Cards launched in September of 2025. It ran all the way from 0 to 100 million extremely quickly, but because it was a new project, it was only hype driven. And then as the bear market ensued, we dropped back down to about $8 million, and that became the floor from 100. So about a 90% decrease in price. However, after we began basing out and conditions slowly started to improve on chain, we had a new narrative blow up, and that was the TCG meta. Now, it was born a year ago, or not a year ago, more like 6-7 months ago. And then it blew up and spawned a whole new meta because of this narrative, which was tokenized Pokemon cards. And we had a bunch of other coins spawn. Gacha happens to be one of them. It gave us a 1500 move from when my app first mentioned it. And then we have Grail, same thing here going on. My app first mentioned it down here at about 200K, and then it ran all the way up to 1.6 million. And you can see when a new meta is born, it takes time for the meta to actually realize and see if it has a foothold within crypto. Does it belong here? Is it a product market fit? And it just so happens to be TCG cards are a product market fit. They simply work. And you can see that validated by the revenue this coin has been producing. So like I said, you can see here TCG, another coin, 182 days waiting until cards actually ran before it could run. So this is actually part of another narrative, and we'll get into that later. But I just want to illustrate to show you that new metas can be extremely risky, but very profitable if you give them enough time to marinate and prove themselves. And then you get a bunch of other opportunities spawning here. Now, since this new meta has been produced, the next wave of TCG coins are going to need to separate themselves from the competition to actually have legs to run to the upside. And that can take weeks for it to happen. Similarly to how we saw it happen with cards, how it needed months for it to solidify itself in the crypto space, we're going to see the same thing happen with this new meta right here. We're going to have to wait and see which projects actually have the vision and the execution capabilities to actually run. So this is a meta I'm definitely watching, and a great example of how narrative is playing out right now, because even though we have contenders here. We don't know which one's going to be the strongest one yet because the meta is still so young. So it requires more patience for you to evaluate. And you don't need to really rush into these coins. You have a lot of time to decide and let the project show you what they're doing. So let's move this on to another couple of examples to really solidify and drive home what narrative or trend trading is. And I just really want to say why this is a 5-part framework is because narrative alone is strong, but it's not enough to hold weight, which is why I've attached 4 other signals to help me separate the noise from the real alpha. So we'll get into that in the next couple of weeks as I shoot these videos and share it with you guys. Now over here we have Troll, and Troll is an interesting one because it has multiple narratives behind it, and a lot of these coins will have multiple narratives or trends behind them. And what's interesting about Troll is that it was trading sideways. The floor was being defended for months, about 90 days, before it decided to go on this monster run from about 10 million to 280 million. Now I want you to look at this date, July 21st, 2025. A lot of people knew Troll was a winner meme, as you guys can see here on this Mount Rushmore pic, which is actually really great. And you can see you are looking at the Mount Rushmore of memes, Doge, Pepe, Troll, and it kind of resonates with people that Troll is an iconic meme that is timeless and it should be ranked higher. So this is one narrative, is that it's in a class of its own along with the other winners. So you can see right there, Troll happens to be one of them, and that's one of the reasons why this coin moved so hard is because it was a strong narrative. It was recognizable and timeless. Now, the other interesting narrative going on here that most people I don't think picked up on was the native utility coin of platform Pump launched on July 12, 2025. And you can see the date where we began running around the ignition point. Right here, you can see we curled down a little bit and then ran hard into August. Was around the same time Pump coin had launched. And for those of you guys who weren't here before, we had a launchpad war where we had Bonk and we had Pump. And those were the 2 main contenders. Of course, there were other coins that were involved, or I should say other launchpads that were involved, but they didn't last and they didn't win. So this was kind of a way for Pump Fund to climb up a winner coin for their launch of Pump Fund, or it happened organically. I'm not really sure which one, but let's say a mix of both. That's probably more of the truth, to be honest. So like I said, this was a mix of 2 different things. And now the next thing we have here is Useless, which was part of the Bonk Fund narrative. We had a new launchpad, and the launchpad narrative was pretty strong because it gained a lot of attention from a lot of prominent people, mainly Bonk Guy. He began really pushing Bonk Fund as this new launchpad that was going to be successful. And what came out of it was actually Useless. And it ran all the way from a couple of $1 million to $400 million. It bottomed out at 7 here. You can see in June, right there, we bottomed out at 7, went all the way up to 400 million. So that was part of the Bonk Fund narrative, but I don't think it would have been successful if it didn't have a prominent figurehead to push the Bonk Fund narrative forward. So as you can see, there's a lot of moving parts here, which is why I built the system that I'm going to show you guys in a little bit to help me keep track of all this, because it can be very exhausting. So next up, we have the same idea with Uranus. It was another launch pad, and this one wouldn't have done so well on other launch pads because it was a joke with the name. It was launched on Jupiter. The meme coin was Uranus. You can see the narrative attachment there is pretty obvious, but it ended up running from a couple millions. I think it was 1 at the bottom down there, and then 8 as it was bouncing around, all the way to $70 million. So a pretty nice move. If you were trading this back then, you could see the narrative emerging, and it was likely that this was going to be a winner based on what happened previously with the other coins and their launch pads. They had associations with them that would help you identify the potential. Now, just because you can identify it doesn't mean it's going to win right away, but it's a nice way to filter out the noise and kind of hone in on the real potential. Now, before we move on to the next couple of examples, I want to show you the narrative tracker that I built here. You can see it right here. What it does is it scans narratives for me and presents them to me so that I don't have to go sifting through all the different narratives that are out there. And it's not always right. I'm still optimizing it. This is just a demo right now, but I just want to show you the potential this has in the future. And if you guys are interested in this, you can go ahead and click on the PDF, grab the free PDF, the framework. It's completely free. All you have to do is put your email in, and in the future, when I open this up for testing, if you guys are interested, I can send you a link to go ahead and test the app I'm going to build, or it might be a Telegram link where you guys get alerts and you guys can test out the alerts and see how it works. So I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to structure it, but this is still all very early. Things might change. So if you guys are interested in that, make sure to sign up so you guys get these slots, because it'll be first come, first serve, open to a couple people as I'm testing it out. But as you guys can see, we have multiple calls here. GTVO is called the VVV of Solana. It's kind of too small to be called that in my opinion. It's at a couple million in market cap. It got detected at 181K and ran to about 3.3 million, which is pretty insane because it happened really quick overnight almost. Pumpcade, it got called at 4.4, ran to 50. Gotcha got called at 780,000 and ran to 8.6. This one was the most recent one. And then we have knock called at 17. And you can see the rest here. Cards detected at 12 million. And Tiny World, probably the least impressive winner, got detected at 300K and ran to 1 million. This helps me tremendously because it saves a lot of time and a lot of headache trying to keep up with whatever is going on in the crypto space. I can't keep up with it all. So this just filters out the noise and gives me the highest potential possibility. Of course, it's not perfect, but like I said, it filters out the noise. And that's kind of the main objective here, is filter out everything that doesn't matter. Give me most of the stuff that matters. And if I miss one or two, that's fine, as long as I get the majority. So that's just an example of what I'm building. And like I said, this is part 1 of a 5-part system. So there's other parts that I'll show you guys in the next few videos. So if you want to keep up with that, make sure to subscribe. Now, let's move on to the next example here for our sub-narratives. And what I want to show you here is these tech coins on Solana, because tech coins on their own on Solana are part of a different narrative, because we have tech coins on Base, tech coins on Solana. And not only that, but this one is special because these ones are backed by Pump Fund. As you guys can see here, the 11th winner of the $3 million Build in Public Hackathon is here, and it was Daydreams. And then we have the collector group, which was this token down here, which you can see was represented by the price going up as they announced the winner. We didn't know who the winner was prior to the announcement. So you can see this is also part of a narrative, and the performance on these coins is really, really great. You can see they're backed by Pump Fund, which is a narrative on its own because they only have, I think, 15 winner slots that they're going to be giving away. It's a $3 million pool, and each team gets about $250,000. So this on its own is its own sub-narrative. We have the tech narrative for the AI coins. That's a narrative on its own. This one's a prediction market one. So you can see you're trading multiple narratives at once. And on top of that, you have the winners of the hackathon. So that can't be diluted anymore. Shout out to Anna for that line. I loved it. And you can see multiple coins, one after the other, as people start to believe that tech coins on Solana can exist, which is its own narrative, because a lot of people see Solana as this meme chain. But when that narrative changes, people will begin believing. And as you guys can see, the price does start going up as people believe more in the narrative that Solana can be much more than a meme chain. And Pump Fund is doing their part to change that with this hackathon as well. So identifying the Pump Fund narrative would have had you buying into Pumpcade extremely cheap and getting 11x off that. Codec down here, if you identified that down here, that was a huge winner as well, about a 30x. And then Opal, you could actually have gotten this at $300,000 to $800,000. My app right here found it at $800,000, not a bad price. And then it went up to 5.5. By no means do I think this is done. I think it has higher to go. So this is still early days on this move, but this happens to be a move that is happening in real time. So I do think a lot of these coins have higher to go because Pump Fund did invest at a $10 million valuation, and we're still sitting at sub 10 million for Opal and for Codec. So now the final example I want to share with you guys here is Peanut. And Peanut is a real world meme coin, tokenized as a lot of them are, but this one is based off injustice and a lot of emotional charge behind it. And it grew at an incredibly fast rate once the story picked up traction. You can see here at the bottom, when I first discovered it, it was $3.3 million, and I did not hold until $2.39 billion because you just don't expect these things to go up that crazy, but there you go. It was a story that accelerated extremely fast within a 1-month time frame. Because the story was so emotionally charged, it just ran at a very fast pace to high heights. And a similar thing we can see happening today is with Henry. Now, I don't know the story on this person. I just read the description. Apparently, it was about a stabbing that happened. And you can see that these narratives kind of mirror each other about injustices. So I'm not going to talk about the morals of trading these things, but I just wanted to highlight the differences in the narratives that you can spot within crypto and how many sub-narratives there are, because there are layers to this stuff. But if you can connect the dots and see what has potential and what doesn't, then you can catch the early winners. Because on Gacha, for instance, I didn't quite believe that Gacha had the potential to run yet because the ceiling on cards wasn't high. However, there's a trade-off here. So you could bet on Gacha at these very low prices and reap the rewards, but the risk is much higher. I would rather now wait, because we can see that, okay, TCG is a meta. I would rather now wait for the winners to present themselves so I can evaluate projects side by side and come to a decision based on a matured meta, because the earlier the meta is, the higher risk. So I like to mitigate that risk by waiting and allowing price to move towards the discovery phase and then settle down, and then I'll begin to evaluate which one I can pick. So there's different ways to play the narrative game. You can take the higher risk method, or you can play the patience game and wait, because you know these things take time. Like I said, this one took 272 days to move. So I do think we have some time with the TCG meta, and I'm going to take my time to find the right project to invest in to capture the upside that is most likely coming to cards. But that is it for today's video on narratives. I hope it was an eye-opener and you guys gained a lot of knowledge to see how narratives can help you turn a few $1,000s into hundreds of thousands, because potential like this exists every day. You just have to filter it and find it early enough. So if you guys are interested in the next videos, make sure to like this one, subscribe, and wait for the next launches because they are coming out in succession. So with that said, I'll see you guys on the next one.